So,
Julia, are we good back there?
are you speaking anything?
No, I just,
Okay.
okay, we have our moderator, Robert C. Atkinson, who will introduce Robert D. Atkinson.
C and D, yes. Well, thank you. And yes, I will introduce Rob Atkinson. I'm Bob. When I started at the FCC, Rob, I think, was at Progressive Policy Institute, and he was well quoted in the Washington Post. And so I would wander into my office at the FCC, and the phone would be ringing from the chairman's office. And the chairman's office would say, "What did you tell the Washington Post? You're not supposed to say anything." I said, middle initial. They finally got it, and it's always amusing to be on the same program with Rob. And on that note, I will turn it over.
Total deniability.
Exactly. Goes both ways. So when I did my very first report at ITIF, I didn't put my middle initial in, and like an hour and a half later, I get an email from Bob, and he goes, "I got all these people asking me if I moved to DC, could you put your middle initial in?" So, okay. All right. So I can't resist. I'm going to talk about policy, but I just briefly sort of give my take on the overall broad point of technology and internet and employment. It's a report we wrote about a year and a half ago or so, I guess 2 years ago now, called Robots Making and Taking Jobs or something like that, and it's on our website. And it sort of was trying to do this kind of definitive lit review of what all the econometric evidence was. It did a historical review, and the basic answer is we shouldn't worry about unemployment or labor force growth. I think those are just not issues. They're non-issues with regard to the internet. I think the issues to think about are much more about occupational restructuring and displacement. So that gives you a sense. If you can find a correlation there, let me know. Essentially, there's no correlation between decades long productivity growth and average unemployment. You see this globally. It's a World Bank study, again, shows almost no correlation between change in productivity and change in unemployment. So yet, I said it was my hobby to critique this book, wrote a review of it, and spoken out against it many times. But this is one of the claims in this book, Second Machine Age, and they love using this chart. And if you look at that chart with the blue line being employment growth indexed to 100 in 1946 and the orange line being productivity, it looks like something bad happened around the end of 1990s when the internet really flourished. And this looks pretty bad that all of a sudden, so clearly productivity is hurting job growth. Yeah, except what really happened there was the population growth of basically 25 to 54-year-old people also stagnated. So that divergence had nothing, zero, to do with productivity growth. It had to do with demography. It's kind of obvious, but it doesn't stop them from continuing to make this claim. So why do people make this claim? I think you heard a little bit about it, frankly, from Jeffrey Sachs, that we're going to have massive, he didn't say this, but a lot of people say we'll have massive unemployment. You have a number of advocates saying that the internet and IT are going to lead to upwards of 50% unemployment, permanent. A new lumpenproletariat will need to provide the permanent income support to. Why do they say that? Because on the one hand they see this, all these jobs and then going away, and then they say, look, Google doesn't employ that many people. And I think Bob said that earlier. That's really missing the point. The point is not about what happens to Google. The point is to look at second-order effects. This is what almost everybody, astounding to me, almost everybody in this debate looks at second-order effects. So here's the first order. It's this person using a kiosk to check in. Now there are fewer people employed by the airlines who just check you in with a paper ticket. So we've automated that function to a significant amount. There's still a few people around to help. So what happens with that? Well, the airlines, because there's price competition, intense price competition in airlines, they lower the price of tickets, or they don't raise them as much of inflation by some modest amount. So let's just say it's 15 or 20 cents or 50 cents a ticket. what do you do with that money? Well, some of that money goes to buy those kiosks. So the kiosk machines are made by workers, some of that goes there. But obviously they can't be 100% or else they wouldn't put kiosks in. If it costs them the same to put the kiosk in as they save in labor, nobody does that. So there's a second order effect. What do I do with my 30 cents or 50 cents from cheaper airline tickets? When it adds up, I go spend it. I might spend it at a restaurant. I might spend it somewhere else. And so I'm going to use that savings and I'm going to spend it, and I'm going to spend it at a restaurant, and there will be more restaurant workers. Or maybe I'll spend it on a new TV and there'll be more TV workers. Maybe I'll spend it on having my kid go to Columbia if he can get in instead of going to University of Maryland, and the ratio of professors to students is higher at Columbia and we'll be employing more faculty. Who knows? So why does that work? Because automation lowers prices. Productivity lowers prices, internet lowers prices, leads to more consumption, leads to more job creation. Now, Jeffrey Sachs said the lump of labor fallacy was a fallacy. That's two fallacies, which means it's true. Lump of labor fallacy is a fallacy. For those of you who are not economists, don't know the lump of labor fallacy. The lump of labor fallacy asserts that when you replace, that labor is a fixed amount, and if you take some out, you reduce labor. Why is that a fallacy? It's a fallacy because the other thing Jeffrey Sachs said is per capita income is about $50,000 a year. If you make $50,000 a year, you're probably going to live in that house, if you're lucky. Now, ask the person who's living in that house, if we could double productivity in America and put your salary to $100,000, where would you want to live? They'd say, I want to live there. I think if you ask most Americans, where do you want to live? They'd go, I want to live there. You know, and the point is, you know, it might not be there, but you will take that spending and you will spend it. And so the notion somehow that we've exhausted consumption possibilities or that we're anywhere near exhausting consumption demand from people, I think is just fallacious. It's easy to say that if you're in the top 5 or 10% of income because you think, yeah, you got most of what you want. But if you're like most Americans, you would love to have your income doubled or tripled. Here's what I would do. Okay, at being 6'7", I would never ever fly coach again. Now the reason I don't want to pay $5,000 or $10,000 to go to Europe next week. You know, I'll pay the $2,000. But if I had higher productivity and I had the money, every airline would be a business class airline, and Boeing would be building a boatload more airlines, and we'd employ a lot more airline workers. So my only point is, we haven't exhausted consumption needs, and eventually, even if we do, we'll get lower work weeks, which is more or less the same thing. So what do we need to do? I think the first and most important policy is let's just keep trying to do more and more technological innovation and diffusion. You know, let's get the internet and the technologies related to it into as many industries, as many occupations as fast as possible. And I think it's easy to forget that because we're so focused now on unemployment and we sort of want to slow down. And I think actually that goes a little bit to Robert Gordon's point. Why are things so slow? I think because we've been timid and cautious. Let's not be timid and cautious. All right, now, what do we need to do more specifically? I think one is, you know, and this is not what I'm going to say now. Obviously, nothing's new here. But I think there's a whole set of things we could do. We're doing some of it, but we're not doing it all, and we're not doing it all very well. One is certainly much, much better general skill education, what my colleague David Moschella calls double deeps, which is having really good skills in one thing, like art history or accounting or something else, but also having some level of computer science skills. You don't need to be know how to code in Lisp or Ruby, but you need to have some level of skills like that. This is a new OECD report. I just saw it today. I don't know when it came out or the other day, but it's interesting. This is the number of people 16 to 29 with no computer experience. These are all pretty low numbers, so it suggests that young people are getting computer experience, but it's, in the US we're about 8%, so at one level that's good, but then if you sort of were to go and drill down deeper and say how much computer experience do you have, how much skills do you have, you're still probably with a real challenge there. Higher minimum wage, I don't think there's any doubt about that. Higher minimum wage would have two nice effects. One is it would spur the replacement of labor with capital. One of the reasons we don't have higher productivity in the services is because it's so cheap to put people there, you don't want to put a machine there. So higher minimum, and clearly higher minimum wage would help with the income for the lower third or so. Tax credit for workforce training is something we've proposed, what we call the knowledge tax credit. U.S. companies today invest a third, actually about 37% less in training their workers as a share of GDP than they did a decade ago. So they're cutting back on basic research. They're cutting back on training their workers because those are long-term effects. They spill over now with workers with lower tenure, less tenure, so they don't do it anymore. So why don't we reward that? This notion that if the rich people make a lot of money, it hurts us, I don't really buy that. At one level, it depends how they make them. If they make it on Wall Street, it probably does hurt us. If they make it from an internet startup company, I don't think it does hurt us. But there's no reason we couldn't just say, you got to give us more money. Give us a bunch of more money, and then we can use that for things like either public goods or reducing taxes on lower income people, which would either way help them. And lastly, universal employment benefits. Senator Mark Warner gave a speech yesterday on what to do about the sharing economy. And I think it's an interesting question, but everybody, if you obey the law, if you're a Schedule C worker, in other words, if you're self-employed, everybody is supposed to pay self-employment taxes that you get Social Security. So in theory, we're there. I think whether you like Obamacare or not, moving more towards universal health care would get us there as well. You're not dependent upon health benefits for that. And clearly, our unemployment insurance system is not adequate in the U.S. Many states with almost no benefits, like Oklahoma, places like that. We need national legislation to build a better floor around things like that. So I think those are the key things we can do. But clearly, as I said, really important thing is keep the pedal to the metal. So thank you.
Our next speaker will be Ida Rowley from Telecom Italia. And in terms of questions, if there is a burning question, of course, I guess we could take it right away, but generally speaking, I'd like to have questions at the end. I've asked everybody to keep their presentations relatively short so we'd have more time for questions.
Okay, so thank you for inviting Telecom Italia to this conference. Mario Di Loreto, who is the HR director who should have been here, was really looking forward to participating, but he has some issues he is managing in these days with the government, so it wasn't possible for him to attend. So I am here. I am head of research and education in Telecom Italia. That means I'm in charge of training, knowledge management, and relationships with universities. Now, before going into the case of Telecom Italia and to illustrate how we are struggling with the new job market, first I will give you a quick snapshot of the company. We are the main ICT group in Italy, and we are one of the biggest players in Brazil. We offer several services to our customers, customers on the consumer side, business and public sector. We offer both traditional telecommunication services such as voice and text, messaging, internet access, digital content, cloud computing, office and system solutions. We have quite an interesting market share in Italy, both for fixed phone services, broadband services, and mobile. And on the left, you can see our key numbers in terms of revenues, investments, EBITDA, and our population. We are 66,000 people, and something which is not specified on this chart is that we have an average age of 49, okay, which is a big issue. As you may know, the main telecom companies, the most traditional telecom companies in the world, and especially in Europe, are suffering from the new market, which has been generated by the over-the-top players, such as Google, Facebook, and we saw that earlier, who have changed completely the rules of competition and really disrupted how the market is now functioning. And traditional telco companies are really having a hard time adjusting to this change for several reasons. And Europe, in particular, has quite a big complexity to manage. Since we have a lot of players on the market and there hasn't been a big consolidation, so we still have a lot of players, we're competing on price. So we have revenues which are not growing, they're diminishing because, as you know, our core business has been eroded by the new players on the market. So we are not getting revenues, or we have diminishing revenues for communication, voice and text messaging, which still represent the major part of our revenues, but we can't count on that for long. We have a big geographic diversification, and we have big debt inside the companies. We have a regulatory issue. As you may know, we have very strict rules, and in Italy is particularly strict. So any kind of pricing that we have on the market is regulated. So we have to go through the regulator in order to launch our services and define prices. In terms of politics, there are two issues I would like to focus on. There is not very big funding for research and innovation. And we do not have a clear strategy for treating privacy issues of our customers. Whereas in the US, you can use customer information for a large amount of uses, for commercials and for analyzing habits and so on. In Italy and in Europe in general, this is very, very difficult. And this is not giving us a competitive advantage at all. So the situation is quite complex. So how is Telecom Italia reacting? We, of course, have to change our business model. So we cannot rely on traditional services anymore. But on the other hand, we also have to create efficiency and optimization inside the company. So we have to balance these two dimensions. And Telecom Italia is working on 3 drivers. We are investing in infrastructures because whereas we do not have any more demand for text messaging and voice services, we do have a big demand for broadband services because all of the new players on the market require a lot of bandwidth and new technologies. Of course, the new players are not paying to use our broadband, so we have to keep investing, whereas the other players such as Google and Facebook are actually using our infrastructures for free. And this is quite a big issue that we have to face, and which in some way is also a big difficulty that we are facing in Europe because we do not have a clear strategy on how to manage that. We are working on brand renewal. That means that we are transitioning from our Telecom Italia brand to TIM, which is our mobile brand that we have used up to now. And it is really more appealing, and we will be transitioning to TIM definitely in the short term. Then we have to, of course, work on people and work on their competencies, on their skills, and on their motivation, since, as I said before, we have a population of average age 49. And that is quite a big challenge. And as you see on the top, what we would like to offer our customers is more innovation, more proximity, enable their digital life, and improve their customer experience. And all of this requires new skills that we have to bring inside the company. Now, how are we going to do this? We have 2 levers. One is hire people, but as you will see in a short while, this is going to be very difficult for Telecom Italia. And the second is work on the people that we have inside the company and help them reskill and invest on training and education, even if this is going to be quite difficult because people may not be engaged to do so and may not have the right attitude and the possibility to do so. Now, as I said, we have a plan of hiring 4,000 people in the next 4 years. But there is a but. Italy has now a new law since December 2014 called Jobs Act, which enables the government to execute on the topics that you see here. And one in particular is very important for Telecom Italia, which is the second, the active policies for employment. Because Telecom Italia has not been able to hire people for the past 10 years, almost. And in the past 4 years, this has been absolutely impossible because we have activated what we called a solidarity contract. And that means that we asked our employees to work less and to earn less, and the government integrated their loss to a certain amount. Now, we have done this for 4 years, and the condition was that we could not hire anyone. And now, what we are hoping to do is to influence the government in order to have a new kind of solidarity contract, which is called intergenerational. And that means that we should agree on having people work less and earn less in order to hire young people inside the company. But this is something that the government has not executed at the moment. I mean, they haven't given the details of the law, and we hope they will do so by the 15th of June, and that's why Mr. Di Loreto could not be here today, because he is working with the government on this. And this is something which is crucial for Telecom Italia, because if we do not have the possibility to hire people, of course we will not be able to renew the skills that we need inside the company. But what are we doing with the employees which are already inside the company? We are working on innovation. Since the government is not funding in research and innovation for companies, if not up to a very small amount, we are investing in innovation in terms of infrastructures. So we are working on the new network. We are activating projects with universities, and we now have 4 laboratories, or 8 laboratories in Italy with the main universities. And the laboratories are on their premises, okay? So this is not something usual for Italy, where it is for the US, but it's something very new that we are doing. So we have 8 laboratories working on topics which are interesting for Telecom Italia and its growth, and it's for its new services, such as big data, Internet of Things, robotics, and so on. And we hope to be able to innovate the company by having these collaborations. The other project is funding startups. So we fund startups with grants. We incubate them in 4 incubators we have in Italy. We incubate 40 companies a year, and they're helping us innovate. We are helping young people, foster their and have their businesses grow. But we are also helping Telecom Italia innovate, which is something very difficult to do from the inside, because we are so big and we have processes which do not allow us to be so flexible and so fast in innovation. We are, of course, investing in technological evolution. As I said before, we have our laboratory inside Telecom Italia, which is T-Lab, which actually works on this and helps the rest of the company progress on this. In terms of new skills and job opportunities, what we are doing is, first, we are bringing inside the company and reskilling our workforce to bring inside work which is now done by suppliers on the outside of the company. So we're taking that value-added work and bringing it inside to have our employees have sustainable jobs for the future, because their jobs will be obsolete in a very short time. We are working on a platform for new capabilities. That means that we are activating an observatory on what the new skills will be in the future, and it will be a constant observation that we will have in order to know in advance what kind of skills and what kind of training we will have to have inside the company. So in the end, what are we doing? We have to actually have balance between efficiency, which is necessary, and development, because we have to balance between contrasting forces. On the one hand, we have an aging workforce, and we should have new people and a young workforce inside the company. We have old technology which we cannot dismiss already, because we still have a lot of customers who are attached to that old technology, but we know that is going to become obsolete in the near future, so we have to necessarily invest on new technology. And we also have to balance between what the company will, what our customers are asking for at the moment, and what they will be asking for in the near future. So it is a very difficult balance to have between efficiency, development, and all the things that are now coming into the scene. I would like to conclude with a positive note, because the situation is quite complex, and our top management is trying to management with all the levers it has, and with considering all the constraints that we have on the market and on the political and on the regulatory side. I don't know if you're familiar with Ernest Shackleton and his expedition to the Antarctic, where his ship has, as you can see it there, is stuck amid the ice, but his crew is playing soccer, and they are very, very optimistic about their future. And in the end, Shackleton does bring his crew home and safely, because he always had a positive thought that he would make it, and his crew did also. So this is our positive message for today.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker, Richard Clarke from AT&T. Perhaps the American view of
This one will advance, this one goes back.
Okay, thanks. Well, thanks so much for inviting me to speak with you about the linkages between ICT's investment and education. And what I'm going to start with is a brief recapitulation of the mechanisms that have already been discussed earlier today that link ICTs and education. First, notice that I'm not going to try to disentangle contributions from just the internet. Statistics are hard enough to ever link ICTs as a larger category with movements in large-scale things such as education and macroeconomic variables. I think it's kind of impossibly heroic to claim to have figured out what's the internet component to all of this. But after doing that briefly, I'm going to describe AT&T's particular initiatives designed both to promote education and skill development generally, but also just to further advance the ability of citizens to develop and take advantage of ICTs in our society today. I think everybody has already gone through this type of diagram about the several different pathways that ICTs can influence employment and the economy. Certainly the most direct influences are via investment in ICT infrastructure like IP networks, electronic equipment, and user devices, as well as by development of applications, ICT applications or software. And both of these are absolutely essential for ICTs to provide value to customers. But as a fraction of the total economy, they're relatively small sectors. Thus, increases which in ICT development in these two areas, while they have an ambiguously positive effect on the economic performance of these sectors and employment within these sectors, it doesn't move the needle that much in the national scheme of things. Where the most massive influence takes place is in the usage of ICTs, both by businesses and by residences. This is because the percent of customers and businesses that use ICTs is a far larger proportion of the economy than ones that produce these things. However, as noted, the influence on employment and how the health of these other sectors, while it might be large, it's kind of ambiguous, at least in the short to intermediate run. ICTs may improve employment and the performance of these sectors. They may reduce employment in these sectors. We just don't know, but we hope in the long run everything will work out. Now, here's just some statistics on the growing importance of ICT jobs and wages in the U.S. I've seen similar story with EU statistics. The first thing to note is that ICT-centric jobs exist both in the ICT industry as well as in other sectors of the economy. Indeed, there's more ICT-centric type jobs outside of the ICT sector than inside the ICT sector, with there being roughly 5 million outside and 3 million inside. But another thing to note is the ICT sector also employs people in non-ICT centric jobs. And all of these things are growing rapidly. ICT centric jobs are growing rapidly, and ICT industries are growing rapidly. And beyond that, these are good jobs. Wages for both ICT-centric occupations average 141% of the U.S. average and 176% of the U.S. median. And even if you're not an ICT person, if you work in it like me and work in an ICT sector, you're benefited by wages that are 137% of the U.S. average and 152% of the median. Okay, and as noted, ICT-related jobs are both significant in their numbers and they pay better than unrelated jobs that are unrelated to ICTs. But the industrial sectors of our economy that are the fastest growing are ones that use ICTs or are related to ICTs, both in terms of percentage growth rates and absolute output increases. But in order for these sectors to thrive, they require people to be able to perform these type of positions. And if you look at roughly 19 out of the 20 occupations that the Bureau of Labor Statistics projects to grow the fastest over the course of the next decade, 19 out of these 30 require some form of post-secondary education to enter and be productive in them. So, in addition to being post-secondary education, STEM education, I assume everybody's familiar with that acronym, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, is typically required for ICT-related jobs. And indeed, there's also a very deep connection between better education, better employment, and increased use of ICTs. Many jobs that formerly needed little education have, due to ICTs, been replaced by jobs that need greater education. Further, we find that the more educated is a household, the greater it uses ICTs, so the more likely it is to purchase products from us and from other ICT-related companies. Because of this, better education, and particularly STEM education, is a win-win for companies like AT&T. It provides us and our business partners who use ITTs with a more capable workforce. And a better educational level also increases demand for the ICT-related products and services from customers. So, as a result, we think that ICTs and innovation and economic growth innovation and economic growth are going to be advanced. The better both go together. As a result, AT&T has focused a very substantial portion of its community philanthropy on educational initiatives. The name for our umbrella program dealing with this is called Aspire, and it will spend over $350 million on educational improvement projects over the 2008 to 2017 period. These projects cover a very broad reach of initiatives, including not just secondary educational improvement projects, but also projects to reduce high school dropout rates and provide students with mentoring opportunities with AT&T employees. Aspire also is supporting the development of professional training for students pursuing technical careers and ICT-based technologies, and also investigating ICT-based technologies that may provide some efficiencies in delivering education more efficiently, more quickly, at less cost to people. So what are some of these initiatives? Well, one way to make education more attractive to today's students is to leverage the fact that while parents typically have to nag their children to crack open a book, they rarely have to nag them to take use of a mobile device or a gaming device. Thus, a substantial portion of Aspire initiative funding has gone towards developing learning tools and technologies that take advantage of today's mobile broadband technologies, along with video devices and communications. It's also absolutely essential to make sure that not only do you have good education, but you have out-of-school support for students focusing on their education. Because without this out-of-school support, you have many students who do not succeed as well in class as they otherwise might. Aspire supports programs offered by organizations such as Grad Nation, Communities in Schools, and several others aimed at increasing high school graduation rates. And again, I cannot overemphasize the importance of this. We all know that in order to be a success, you need two things. You need some talent and education, but you also need to be motivated. We probably all know plenty of kids who were classmates of ours in school who we thought were smarter or better capable, more talented than us, who perhaps because of less motivation never really took advantage of their capabilities as much as possible. So motivation is also required. And there's nothing that may help to motivate people better than to having better exposure, particularly one-on-one exposure, to demystifying what's involved with having a job, or to better understand why schooling is valuable. And I and many of my colleagues at AT&T are among the thousands of our employees who have spent portions of our work days mentoring students and trying to make this world of work to be less of a black box and something more that they can relate to and better understand why education today will help them achieve success tomorrow. But now let's go to some more advanced educational issues. Currently, advanced education tends to be bundled into four-year degree programs, which are very expensive. You thought that companies like mine that try to bundle video and broadband and wireless services and telephone services together were the big people who evaded consumer choice. Well, they're past masters to the universities. That you got to get a four-year degree or a four-year graduate program in order to acquire specific skills. But this is very expensive. So Aspire supports an initiative that's going on that was called Udacity. This is a joint initiative of AT&T, Google, Facebook, and several other leading ICT companies to develop something that we call nano degrees and courses. These programs focus on some specific ICT-related job skills and sets. They differ from traditional university-based degrees and courses in that they're compressed in time. Each course may take 1 to 3 months to complete for an individual course, or 6 to 12 months for an entire nano degree. And they're taught using online MOOC, massive online, open online curriculum. I forget. Oh, no, I have it written down here. Okay. Okay. And because of this, they tend to be highly economic. It costs a student or their employer, if the employer is paying for them to take one of these courses, only about $200 a month. Anybody who has a kid in college knows that that's beer money for the average college student. Further, a larger group of employers, including the companies like GE and Capital One, in addition to AT&T, Google, and all these members, have agreed to accept the credentials offered by these Udacity nano degrees. But, for more advanced professional training, AT&T Udacity has also partnered with Georgia Tech to develop a full 36-hour credit hour MOOC format Master of Science in Computer Science curriculum, which again costs the students only about $7,000 to $8,000 in tuition for a complete degree, which again is a huge bargain. Okay, so in sum, improved education and ICT skills are critical to our advanced economy, both to make sure that the ICT sector remains a vibrant sector, but also to make sure that all citizens really are sharing fully in modern life, which so much has become based on ICT knowledge. We try to improve education and skills both for selfishly to try to improve the productivity of the workforce, but also to improve the ability of all businesses and consumers to take advantage and benefit from these technologies.
Our next speaker will be Eva Klein from McMasters University.
And I need Jason.
Jason.
I have a video. Yeah, I have a video. I have movies. Now, where am I? Oh, here. Okay, I think I know how to do this. And I think I don't. Actually, I think I'm okay. Okay, so we'll start off, and I think I know how to get to my video. I think I'm actually more technical. No, I'm okay. I'm okay. I know how to do this, actually. I'm more technologically advanced than I thought. Well, it's been a fascinating time for me here with lots of new insights and learning, and I've really enjoyed it. I'm going to change focus here because I'm a little bit duck out of water, being a psychologist, not an economist. And as you can see, I'm in the Department of Psychiatry. And what I'm going to focus on is the individual. What are the repercussions of some of this digital economy on people, and working people in particular? So what I'd like to do, and the collateral damage that we're going to talk about as well. So what I'd like to do is start off with a short little video, I just want to give you a little bit about the video. It's about Shimon Peres, who was a prime minister of Israel, and just recently, in 2014, retired as the president of Israel. So let's see. Let's see if I can, how do I escape? Oh, that I don't know how to do. Oh, here, escape. Okay, let's see. No. Okay. Okay.
זה היה נשמע כמובן. זה הניוטרון. זה הניוטרון.
אדוני הנשיא, סיימת כבר לארוז?
אני עובד על זה.
מצוין. חשבת מה אתה הולך לעשות ביום שאחרי?
גם על זה אני עובד.
אוקיי, אז איזה ניסיון יש לך?
הייתי רפתן ממדרגה ראשונה.
הכל עכשיו חליבה אוטומטית.
הייתי גם רועה צאן ולא איבדתי אף כבשה.
עכשיו כולם טבעונים.
הייתי שר דואר. גם דואר נכנס וגם דואר יוצא.
עכשיו הכל במייל.
אני הקמתי את רפאל.
מה זה מסעדה הזו? למה ככה יקר? תגיד.
זה לא המסעדה, זה רשת לפיתוח אמצעי.
אז אין לך ניסיון. תחפש משהו, קווה לטוב.
שלום, 95 מלא.
שמן מים?
לא תודה.
2 שישיות מים ב-20 שקלים?
אני לא מעוניין.
אתה רוצה נוזל או שמשות?
אני לא מעוניין.
מחצלת לקמפינג אולי?
טוב, בוא נתקדם.
בסדר. ערכת קריוטי?
אני לא מעוניין, אוקיי?
מצופים דורה?
לא, אפשר לשלם?
שמע, אם תמשיך להגיד לא לכל הצעה, תשלם מחיר כבד.
טוב, תביא את המצופים.
סע לשלום. זה הפתרון היחידי.
Okay, so what does that, I'm just going to take a moment and ask you, as I find myself again. Oh, I minimized myself, exactly. Oh. Lower left. Oh, right. Thank you. Oh, there we are. Okay. Okay, so what does that video mean to you? Besides it being cute, a nice after lunch waker-upper.
The mismatch between how we describe what people can do and how employers describe what they're looking for.
Right, so there's a very qualified person, and all his experience is for naught. Yeah.
You know, something that was really interesting in that video is
Yeah.
the fact that a lot of the things that she was emphasizing, as Mike mentioned, is these very tangible skills. But we're talking about soft skills that are much more difficult to see or be able to quantify. So how do you show somebody that you have those soft skills when you don't have?
Oh, it's for you.
But it's a bit too late.
Oh, okay, I'll come back.
Like to walk around?
No, I'll come back. Oh, I see. If I walk around, I see.
So the fact that we cannot see the soft skills, and we don't have a way of measuring those soft skills compared to the hard skills that are much more measurable.
So he was basically dismissed as, relegated to pumping gas. You can't hear me.
There's another mic on the table.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry about that. Relegated to pumping gas. Any other thoughts about the video here? Yes.
Her point that it's cross-disciplinary. That's the only word I wanted to say was cross-disciplinary skills aren't captured in the way we define it.
Right, yes.
I think the wrong questions were asked because he had a lot of skills, but no one asked him about his leadership ability, his writing skills, his analytic and critical thinking, his negotiation skills. But they were looking for different skill set, but he had a lot of skills, but no one found them in the questioning.
Right. Yeah. Any other thoughts here? Yes, Bob?
He'll be hired next by the Chinese.
What's this?
He'll be hired next by the Chinese.
Well, you can also see just another point, and I'll get back to it a little bit later, because Paolo mentioned it as well, how people over 50 are put to pasture, right? We can't learn new skills, and I'll say a little word about that a little bit later. Okay, so I want to share with you this, and Paolo, you brought that up in terms of temporary workers and the new condition that we have in our labor force. Now, some of my colleagues at McMaster University, in conjunction with United Way, decided that they would study some of these workers and see who has temporary employment and who has permanent employment. And this actually doesn't cover people from the ages, it only covers people from the ages of 25 to 65. So there's lots more temporary workers before 25. And you can see 48.1% of people have permanent jobs. Then we have 8.2% of people who are permanent part-time. And then we have temporary and contract, another 20% right here. So when you add all the numbers up, or have I gotten them a little mixed up there? But all in all, because this isn't a data-driven presentation, is we have about 30% of people who are temporary and who have no secure employment. And what my colleague and the United Way have called that is they've called it precarious employment, which basically means that through no fault of your own, you do not have a permanent employment, something that you can count on. And that, in fact, includes people whose income has not fallen as well. So let's get behind these numbers a little bit. Okay, so lack of employment security really affects your health. And these are workers in precarious employment. Let's see how. Generally, whether your income has gone up or down, you report worse mental health. And why do you do that? Well, first of all, you're very anxious. Secondly, your family life suffers. And if you're not part of a union anymore, and I'm not a real union person, but the union provides a lot of comfort for people. It's a social group, and all of a sudden people don't have that. So they are not as well off mentally. They're 55%, and I won't hold to the numbers here, but they're 55% more likely to get depressed. Now, why would they get depressed? Well, they feel a little hopeless about the future, don't they? They don't really know what's going to happen to them. And I want to just read to you a little bit about what people like this say. I've done so much temporary work and no one's ever made me permanent or extended the contract, and it's really frustrating because I'm tired of temping. I just want some stable employment. It's so frustrating. This is Tonvi, a woman in a call center who has a university education. Oh, this is a guy here. He says, I'd say I had had a bit of a breakdown. It was tough. It was violent. I wanted my life to end, but I didn't really want to kill myself. Really, there was no medical professional that helped me out of that situation. It was employment that helped me out of that situation. So the person finally got a job, and that helped that person out of it. Now, what else do we have besides the mental? We have poor general health as well. And we know there is a mind-body connection, and we know that when people are worried, their health isn't going to be as good. If we consider what we are paying for health care in this country, and all of a sudden we've got 1/3 of our population who is being made sick by their employment situation, that's going to cost us a lot of money. Even us Canadians who have public health care. And you Americans, I can't even imagine what that is going to cost you. Now, I don't know how many people here took Psych 101. Oh, good. Remember this? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So it's still sort of true in terms of motivation. So if your basic security isn't met, how can you self-actualize? How can you do a decent job if you're scrambling for where your next paycheck is going to do? It's going to be very inferior work that we're going to get out of people, even people that are being paid half decently. Now, I know I'm in a room with some academics, and I think tenure is a wonderful thing. But think if you in this room did not have tenure. How would that affect the work you do? Say you had a 6-month contract. Say you had a 1-year contract. What projects would you work on? Would you work on a project where you could publish papers within 6 months or a year? Or do you need that tenure to feel secure? So this is what's hitting people in this precarious employment. I just had a chat with David over lunch, and I said to him, as you were speaking this morning, it occurred to me that people in the acting professions are actually precarious too. But there, I think the difference is it's self-initiated. They're entrepreneurs. I mean, they choose to be in precarious employment because they're entrepreneurs, and we'll be hearing from an entrepreneur right after me. So that's the difference, whereas people in these precarious situations don't have a choice. This is just the way it is. So it is rather doom and gloom, but I would like to bring up something else. So here we have a picture. What? 3-4 minutes, I need just a little more. Okay, I'll try to talk quickly. Bromont, Quebec. So IBM in 1972 decided to set up a plant in Bromont, Quebec, which is about maybe 60, 70 miles away from Montreal, to produce electric typewriters. Well, in the 1980s, they had 200 people working. In 1980s, well, it was obvious that IBM was no longer going to be able to produce these electric typewriters. So they had a choice. What did they do? Did they close Bromont down? Or did they choose to retrain these people? That's exactly what they did. They spent $1 million, several $1 million retraining them. And fast forward, in 2014, they just divested most of their microchip business, but not this plant. They kept this plant because it was so profitable and such an asset to them. Now, who are these Bromont people? Like, are they rocket scientists? No. No, they're not. They're just ordinary people. Their parents, grandparents were all farmers. Many of them don't even have high school educations. Some of them do. Why are they able to be so profitable? Because they're motivated, they have the right attitude, they have attention to detail, they know how to cooperate with each other, teamwork. So my belief, and the point of this whole story, is that you can teach many people lots of skills if they have the right attitude. Okay, so this is the dilemma, and we can see AT&T is not doing that, and neither is Telecom Italia. But to train or not to train? Well, if I train my people, they're going to steal them, right? They're going to poach them. If I don't train them, they may stay, and I've got really horrible employees, and I'm not going to be very competitive. So how workers learn new skills, well, I'll just leave that because we've touched on that a little bit, that most workers learn new skills on the job with really very little formal training. So I want to just look at this iceberg here. So people think training is very expensive, right? So we see the visible training costs, the time off, the facilitators, the learning curve. You know, you're not going to get the best employee right away. But they don't really think of the true costs, the turnover, the low morale, the accidents, the poor customer service. So it's very, very small-minded. 1 minute. Well, I have to tell my little story. I'm wondering which story to tell. Okay, I'm going to tell this story. When I was a VP of HR, you know, when companies do have training budgets, somebody in the warehouse came to me and he wanted to take a reflexology course. Now, you know, electronics, reflexology. Anyway, I decided I would go to bat for him, and he took his reflexology course. Well, the following year, he finished his high school education. The year after that, what did he do? He decided to take a computer course, and we were trying to computerize some of the warehouse. And he became an advocate for computerization. So one of the things that is so essential about training is that basically people hate change. They're afraid of change, as they should be. And one of the things that training does, it inoculates people against fear, because all of a sudden they have some competencies. And so training is so essential. And some of the costs that people try and the ROIs that they try to do are very small-minded. We don't decide if we're going to chlorinate water or not, right? We just decide it's a given. It's a good thing, and we're going to do it. So I'm not going to tell you my Jack Welch story. So collateral damage or beneficiaries of the new economy. Now, Robert Young was talking about how through the many different eras of the steam engine and Ford and now our digital economy, people's lives have changed. And we often say, how sad, too bad. But what I'm saying, and Jeffrey Sachs was in fact saying the same thing over lunch, it is possible for us to both not put these people in the garbage heap and have a very viable economy at the same time. And I hope some of you will have the influence to make that happen. Thanks.
And our last speaker, according to my list, is Bruce Lincoln, an affiliate here at Columbia at CITI, as well as with Silicon Harlem.
Okay.
You want to use the...
I'm going to stand in front. I don't need the handheld.
Yeah.
Everyone can hear me okay? So good afternoon. My name is Bruce Lincoln. I'm a senior fellow here at CITI, and I'm also the co-founder of Silicon Harlem. But I'm also on the Mayor's Broadband Advisory Task Force. So what I want to do today is sort of wear two hats. So in the first part of my 10 minutes, I want to talk about what we're looking at from the standpoint of the Mayor's Office of broadband access, and how we're focusing on issues of creating new jobs, creating a type of digital equity. And then I want to end by talking about some of the things that we're doing from the standpoint of Silicon Harlem. And you'll see how they all tie together and resonate across all these themes that we've been discussing over the last hour or so. So here in New York City at this point in time, tech is the second largest sector in the New York City economy. It's growing exponentially. But one of the issues that we are facing here is that the number of jobs outpaces the number of skilled workers that we can place in those jobs. Those jobs both have a STEM component, they also have a coding component. So we're faced in New York City within the context of a city of 5 boroughs where we're addressing income inequality, a skills gap, and thus an opportunity gap. So how do we, in essence, from the policy side, from the standpoint of the mayor's office, create equity and address those disparities? And how do we also address the need to create a STEM pipeline? We've seen a tremendous amount of growth in the tech startup sector. They're growing in Silicon Alley, they're growing in Digital Dumbo, and they're also growing locally here in Silicon Harlem. One of the things that we're finding is that there's an issue as far as the population that doesn't exist in this tech startup culture and the skills that they have. So I want to talk about a little bit now is this idea of disrupting workforce development. Oh, I don't have any slides. I have an old-fashioned. But that's kind of key, collateral damage or benefits of the new economy. So what we're talking about here is inclusion. But if you look at the traditional way in which workforce development has been done in the city of New York, I believe it's at least a $500 million industry. We get monies from the federal government, and they re-up that contract and that funding every year. We get funding from the state. But there's always been a schism as far as workforce development. The workforce development is done through nonprofits who train people in all sorts of skills that actually have no relevance to the digital economy. and there's never any real connection to the companies and the corporations who have the jobs. And they've historically never been able to make that connection. Now what you're seeing is that the fastest growing companies, the startups such as Spotify or the large organizations such as Google, are growing to where they need computer savvy, computer skilled, full stack developers. If you're at RGA, you actually need not only full stack developers, you need people who can do user interface and user experience development. The breakdown is we're not producing those types of skilled persons through our school system. So the school system has begun to respond to that. They have a lot of programs as far as coding. You even have the growth of the Computer Science in New York City Foundation, which once again was sort of founded by Fred Wilson, the renowned VC, who's also on the Mayor's Task Force with myself, and Sarah Holloway, who's also a professor here in the School of International Public Affairs, creating a foundation that's funding the development of computer science programs in the schools. That's still in a limited number of schools, though it's growing. They have a meetup that is well attended. In fact, they're meeting on Saturday at Google and looking at those sorts of issues. But when you look at the larger scheme of things in a public school system of 1,000 schools, you don't have these programs in, I think, even 10% of those schools. You have also a growth of nonprofits that are starting to do computer coding. Girls Who Code, Black Girls Code. Silicon Valley even has a program called the Apps Youth Leadership Academy, but it's not really addressing the real future need that the city has when it not only looks at how do we make sure there are skilled workers in these companies, but how does the prosperity of those workers then broaden out and raise the level of prosperity in the outer boroughs. So what we're looking to address from the mayor's standpoint is two things. One, we see a correlation between do you have access to low-cost and affordable broadband? Not DSL, but broadband. So there are efforts to now drive that forward. And for the first time, and I believe the mayor announced this at the recent Internet Week conference, there's a commitment of $70 million where now in the budget we're looking at how to drive broadband out into the outer boroughs. That's also tied into a CFI, a call for innovation, where we are saying we want to hear from Jamaica, Queens, and Brownsville, Brooklyn, and Washington Heights, New York City, about ideas for how we can drive the internet out into those communities and make sure people begin to have access. Now, this is all in its early stages. This is, I think, 6 months in, and these are important advances on the standpoint of policy. And this is working both internally and externally. So not only are we trying to figure out ways to create efficiencies and create innovation outside based on these policies, they also have to address how do you create these efficiencies and create innovation across the different agencies. You do not have at this point sort of interagency cooperation. You don't have this type of an interagency network that basically says that the Department of Corrections is working in concert with Tech and Innovation or is working with the Department of Buildings. But what's very interesting is that there have begun those conversations to try to start to drive that and create this type of cultural change. So just in the same way you have to have this type of cultural change and management change within the context of corporations, we now have to have that within the context of a large bureaucracy such as the city of New York. Now, one of the things that's very interesting about as we think about jobs or work in the future, jobs and work are not necessarily going to be located within corporations. They're not necessarily going to be located within offices. And one of the things that you see here in New York is the rapid growth of co-working spaces. WeWork is sort of the behemoth that is growing rapidly, and that's a totally different type of work environment where it's like a carnival. You go in there and you can eat. You're working hard, but all of a sudden you're going to run into somebody when you're getting coffee who's doing something neat, and you're going to figure out how to connect with them. So it kind of drives this idea of innovation through inadvertence. You don't know what might happen based on the idea you have because you're meeting someone else and they've got an idea and you're starting to bring that together. So that's an important driver. That also requires highly capitalized environments, such as what we see with WeWork. And then on a smaller scale, you see that happening in Silicon Hall. We now went, in a matter of 2 years, from 0 co-working spaces to 6 co-working spaces and respond to the types of entrepreneurs that are making themselves a part of this growing ecosystem. We now have 2 acceleration programs. And you see City College, Columbia has led in this area for some time now, going back to 2008 when I was here as an entrepreneur in residence. You now see City College starting to get involved in that, so that you're starting to get this ecosystem to emerge. And my co-founder, Clayton Banks, is here, who's been really driving a lot of this activity. But we see it focusing on 4 key areas when it comes to this idea of creating an ecosystem and creating ultimately what is driven by cultural change. And then I'm going to end by talking about how learning plays a role in all of this. One is the next generation internet. You have to have the next generation internet, not simply to support the rapid growth of these tech startups and the ways in which they work and interact, both locally and remotely, but because in this way you can bring up the rest of the community that's not tech. We know that for every tech job, we create 5 ancillary jobs. So there's a real driver here as far as economic development. The broad dissemination and the cultural growth of the innovation economy, where it's not simply I'm thinking about the next cool app that will take advantage of the fact that you have this broad-based adoption of the smartphones, but the rise of the social entrepreneur and social innovators who are really trying to disrupt how services that were initially deployed and delivered through nonprofits and now basically being delivered through other means. And then if you want to look at how you support the growth of our future leaders and our future populations, it looks at it's the idea of STEM literacy and STEM entrepreneurship. And there are a number of programs that have grown in that regard, but I want to talk in particular about the Apps Youth Leadership Academy, which is a Silicon Valley program that we've done in concert with the Caribbean Cultural Center as well as City College. And in that, working with sort of existing programs, the Department of Ed's Digital Readiness, Career Technical Education Program, as well as some nonprofits like Script Ed who go into the schools and train charter school students how to code, we've been able to put together a flagship that we think we can scale. And a year ago, what we did was we put out a call for applications. 70 students applied. These students range across actually a number of the schools that are already doing coding, so they brought in some of those skills. And what we did was we taught them how to build tech startups in 7 weeks. And what we found was that they could code, they could learn that rapidly, but the most important skills were sort of what we call more affective skills, and those that have to do with computational thinking and digital design. And what they picked up were the ability to work in teams. They had to form teams because they had to form companies. They had to basically be a working group, and they had to figure out how to address issues and differences. They learned logo design. But the big deal with each one of these students, we had them do a lot of pitching. So they each learned how to pitch about whom they were, what they were doing, what their product was they were working on, and they learned how to engage the community through surveys. That development, those affective skills, was very important when it came down to their being seniors. So one of the things we've seen is that they've done very well in terms of their ability to get accepted to colleges. Now, what the issue is, because there's still students coming from low-income communities, and we're working on solving that, working with, say, the United Negro College Fund, is how to make sure they have the monies to go off to colleges. Some of them can get into the Smiths and Smiths can pay for that. They subsidize these top students. So Princeton will pay for you fully. But when you go to some other schools, that's the issue. But the idea of looking at STEM development, STEM leadership early on, and then sort of developing these sorts of projects is very important. But what it gets into, which I told Bob was earlier going to be my title, but now I'm going to use it as my end kind of tagline, is this idea of disrupting the workforce development. So the idea is that we disrupt this idea that the technology is going to create a jobless future and use it to address the fact that if we deploy these advanced networks correctly, if we provision them with the right programs and services, we will actually create jobs. They won't exist in a normal building as they once did. They won't even maybe look like a 9-to-5 job, but there will be work, and it will be tied into individuals who we will skill along the entire spectrum of their development. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like each of the panelists to now take these seats with their beautiful name tags, and we will have some discussions. And if I'd ask the panelists just to pass the microphone along. Who's first? Make it all forms of questions, like Jeremy. Comments in the form of a question.
I was thinking of stating this as a comment, but I'll do it as a question. Why should I believe in the STEM initiatives? Why should I believe that the education system should be responsible for trying to anticipate what 10 years from now my students ought to be doing in your companies? Can I make a little comment?
That sounds like a question mark at the end.
That's a question. That's a question. But a little comment is, in my whole career as an academic, I've been criticized, me and the rest of us, been criticized for not training people for the current needs of business. And we will never be able to train for the current needs of business. And yet we're constantly badgered to address the STEM problem in terms of training. Now, Dee and Bruce Lincoln, you're going to take this from me,
You asked the question.
have addressed these issues in terms of general skills education. I want to know what that means to you in relation to the pressure to address the STEM policies. And you've also spoken about basic skills and other kinds of skills which lead into the kinds of new technology jobs. I want to know what you really think about the relationship between that kind of thinking and the pressures to change our education system.
Thank you. Who wants to take a crack at that? Anybody? Bruce?
I'll use myself as an example. I actually was an English literature major as an undergrad, then got into engineering. So I think there's a couple ways to respond to this. One, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, because one of the things I've found is that whether you're in technology or not, you need to communicate with people, and that's very important. And you also need to have the ability to understand the problem and convey that by working with a team. That's not necessarily STEM. Now, one of the things that they talk about in STEM is, it's acronymized, and it doesn't look at the real skill sets when you're talking about chemists or certain types of engineers. But it is important when you start to think of it from the standpoint that you do want a certain grasp of certain concepts and certain skills. But I think the most important skills of what I was talking about was the ability to collaborate, the ability to identify a problem, and I think on the creative side, the design skills are very important. And I think those are things that can be taught.
Well, let me just say a brief word about it, that you're never going to identify 10 years in advance exactly what the skills are, but the educational institutions, it would be to everyone's advantage if they perhaps became somewhat a bit more flexible. That I don't think you can find a typing course anymore, whereas that was rampant when I was going to high school. that there are, the question is like, what is expected, what are graduation requirements? Is there going to be an upping of the, I think you can graduate from most high school systems with having 2 years of science. Maybe that's a bit minimal nowadays. There's many different levers to.
That's not the policy push for STEM. The policy push for STEM is very specific, it's highly critical of the education system, and it expects things which are completely misleading and divergent from education's function.
You speak, I'll hold it.
Divergent from education's function of training people to become knowledgeable, self-actualizing, and able to learn and respond to what they're taught, most commonly in the workplace.
So I don't agree with that. Look, reality is that we conflate the STEM discussion with the broader discussion. There's only about 6% of the US workforce that are STEM workers. We only need 6%. We don't do a good enough job doing that. So you just put people in physics, chem, CS, they'll do fine. So, and we can improve that. Then there's the other 94%. By the way, anybody ever take trigonometry? Anybody ever remember what it is? I'm clueless to what it was. I know it had something to do with cosines, but I have no idea. I never use it. But given the fact that the recent Educational Testing Service study showed that 39% of American seniors in college are fully literate, meaning 61% are not, 32% are fully numerate. So I don't need you, Jonathan, to teach people calculus. What I need, as an employer, it's amazing to me the number of people I get applying to ITIF who cannot write, who cannot think, who cannot do sort of fundamental statistics. That's what I need. That's what I need.
Okay, next question. Who? Question? Question.
A lot of emphasis on STEM, but there are people that say that we should go from STEM to STEAM, adding the A as arts. This idea of moving towards soft skills. Soft skills, they are extremely important in the competitive world because, you know, so why don't go from STEM to STEAM? First question. The second question was from Bob. How we implement this idea of more progressive taxation? You know, we have, for instance, my suggestion will be, in Europe we have this issue over the top. There is a great tax illusion, okay? So we see very positively the move from Amazon to start to, you know, to pay taxes based on their own revenue in each European state. I think it's the way to go, but it's important this process should be sustained.
So I hate the STEAM idea, I'll just tell you that right now. You know, here's an interesting stat. 3 times as many kids take the AP Art History class, AP Art History test in US high schools as take the CS test, computer science test. There's something fundamentally wrong in a society where you have 3 times as many people taking art. And I know you're not supposed to say that, but that's what I believe. I don't think people need art. You know, there's a small portion of people who are in the creative fields, and it's a great field, and they should do that. That's great. But the idea that really what we need is we just need people who are better scientists, better engineers, better coders, and we're not producing that. And I think forcing people to learn art history or whatever is not going to get us there. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in that. Just to point on the tax thing, I was referring to the US. European taxes are quite high. I don't think that higher corporate taxes are the answer, though, to the inequality problem. Corporate taxes are passed through largely to consumers and workers. I think it's on the individual side.
I just want to, yeah, oh, sorry. I just want to say a little about medical schools, and McMaster is quite an innovative medical school. But one of the things that I teach residents and assistant professors, psychiatrists, and medical people are some of these soft skills. So these soft skills are really essential even when you're a doctor, and people are understanding that you can't be a good doctor unless you can listen, unless you can communicate with your patients, and unless you are collaborative with your patients. So in something as technical as medicine, you'd think the surgeon cuts and that's all there is to it. Well, it's not true in medical school anymore. People are learning the soft skills as well.
I just wanted to answer the question on the STEAM versus the STEM. From my experience inside Telecom Italia, we have a big, a large number of employees who are engineers, and the company has always been engineer-driven. And that means that the company has been technologically driven. And what we were missing, and what we still are missing to a certain extent, is the ability to actually understand the customer's needs and to design new services for customers, which can not only be technological. And that is something that we witnessed, and we are going to foster inside the company the hiring of people with other kinds of disciplines coming from humanities and arts and so on.
So, to be clear, I think what we should have is STEMmed: science, technology, engineering, design, math, and design. Design is an important set of skills. You look at Olin College, they teach every engineer design. So I'm happy with that. But when people talk STEM, they're, piano, music, just painting. I don't think that has anything to do with this. But I do think design skills are, including, if you go to IDEO, for example, in Silicon Valley, IDEO is really design, and it's about how do you get in the customer's head. I agree, that's critical, but that's different than music.
Okay, just real quick, how many people do have questions? Because I want, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, we probably, make them short, please.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Walid Taha, and first of all, I would like to thank all speakers for their interesting presentation. And I have very briefly a comment and a question. Very briefly, because it depends about the question. It's about the solidarity contract and how to work less for earn less. We have experience in Egypt, because I'm Egyptian, that last year we passed a law that we have a maximum wage, especially in public sector. So, of course, in private sector, we do whatever we want. It's their own money. But in public sector, we have now a maximum wage, and even the president decide. I'm sorry? Yes. Okay. So our experience, we have a maximum wage, and some other country stopped and limit the access for other new players to go to the market, pretexting that we need to protect personal data, but in reality they don't want to fire the local workers in their company. My question is goes for Ida. About the innovation, it's very hard, like you say, and the relationship between efficiency and development. But what do you think? I think in this case, innovation and growth, it's not going together. In another term, we need a different type of innovation with a concept of development without losing work. What is your strategy to deal with this? Thank you.
Well, actually, we are trying to combine both the innovation and bringing the innovation which we are fostering inside the company. Just to give you an example, we fund startups and then we incubate them. And now, after a certain period, we accept them as suppliers. And this is something they would never be able to do because we have very strict policies on who can be our suppliers and the profits and all kinds of conditions. But bringing them inside the company as suppliers, they are helping us innovate the company. And also the research we are doing with the universities, which is an industrial kind of research, that is also going to help us to innovate. But we are doing all of this outside of the company in order to bring it then inside. Because from the inside, we have too much bureaucracy, too many rules, and too many norms, and it is really impossible to do so.
I think that there's a big elephant in the room, and I would like you to comment
Google has worldwide less employees than Telecom Italia, whose average age is 49. So we're here facing a major disruption if we're talking about who's hiring, where's the center of gravity of, let's call it, this ecosystem, and how you're dealing with this massive transformation. I'm thinking of Eva's presentation. I'm saying, aren't we facing like a big, massive disruption in terms of what's going to happen with this workforce?
No. We're not. Look, it doesn't make any difference. The ideal world would be to have Twitter have one employer, Facebook have one, and Google have one. Just like everything but robot, and Larry Page just comes into work every day and presses a button. And that'd be the ideal thing. That'd be great for us, because then all those Google workers could go out and work at restaurants, and we'd have more restaurant meals. So anybody, an economist, want to disagree with that point? That's kind of fun. Let me just finish. The reason why we don't have to worry about this is that, thank God, Google doesn't have 5 million employees, because if they did, we'd all be paying $50 a month to use Google. Well, look, ultimately, again, that doesn't matter. If the telcos get super efficient with software-defined networks and other things like that, and they employ half the people in 10 years, that's fantastic, because it means our broadband prices are lower. And then we're going to use that money on something else. I mean, the idea of holding on to firms or industries because we believe they're important, it's not the employers that's important, it's the output that's important.
Just to be specific, we have a big constraint. I mean, probably we do not need 66,000 employees or 52,000 in Italy, but we have our law does not allow us to fire people if we do not need them anymore or if they are not productive. So this is a huge constraint that we are dealing with and struggling with. So the only thing we can do is retrain them and motivate them and have them be more productive. And bringing in work which is not done inside the company now, but we are having our suppliers do. So this is the constraint that we have to deal with.
Judith, you had a question? No, it's been answered. Okay. Ellie? Nope. Sorry. I mean, at the end, let me just go through people who had their hands up. Ellie, you had your hand up. Did you want to ask a question? Then I'll come back.
To Rob, you painted the picture of the long-term, long-run type adjustment of employment, and that's fine. But in the short term, the guy who loses the job needs also to be dealt with. So what is your kind of policy on that? And to Eva, I have a question, which is, how do people deal with internally with skill retraining when, I mean, your example was the whole factory, and I can see that's kind of like a team effort, but when it's an individual, a steel worker becoming a computer programmer, is that realistic? What are the issues here?
So just to be clear, when I say long-term or long-run, I'm talking a year or two. So the evidence is pretty clear that a productivity shock works its way through the economy within 1 to 3 years. So we're not talking 10 years for a new equilibrium to emerge. So, and I just think we have to say there's two things we have to do. We have to, as I said in my talk, put the pedal to the metal, maximize productivity so that Bob Gordon's not right, and secondly, put in place a much better set of policies so that workers who are affected by this are going to have a lot more ability to move around and find other positions, and that's going to require a bunch of different things. But the answer cannot be, let's have a law that Telecom Italia can't lay off its workers. All that does is make Telecom Italia prices higher.
Okay, I see what you're saying, what it shouldn't be, but you were kind of pretty quick passing over the what should be.
That's because I had a talk and I didn't want to repeat my talk. I don't know if you saw the talk, that's what I said should be done, all of those 7 or 8 things. Well, yeah, because I had 10 minutes in my talk. I'm happy to send you, Ellie, what I've written on this if you'd like.
To your point, Ellie, so my experience in Calgary with the upstream oil and gas industry, which is really in need of a lot of skilled workers, the human petroleum industry was really successful in taking forestry, pulp and paper, and a number of different industries, and working with those industries before they shut down and training them in the gas and oil industry. And so they tried to take skills that were somewhat similar. For example, if you were operating a crane in the forestry industry, you could very easily operate a crane in the gas and oil industry. But one of the other things that made the difference between success and failure was working conditions. So for example, if a guy was living in Newfoundland and had to move to Edmonton and the northern part of Alberta and couldn't bring his family, that made it not work very well. So again, it's partly skills, but a lot of the human conditions are what make a difference between success and failure.
Another question here, real quick, and then.
I just wondering, this question is for Eva Klein. Have you known that in United States, I don't experience what you have stated. I was with New York Telephone before the divestiture. That time still with our mother company is AT&T. I had a lot of training, like 1/5 of my annual work time is either in training, company provide training, or outside training but paid by company, or attend conferences. And also for Richard, how's the Aspire program? Does that relate to, when did it establish? How does that relate to our today's topic, the new internet or new media technology? Thank you.
Sorry, I'm sorry, I don't understand the
very
question.
quickly, have you had any human resource experience in United States? Because you mentioned that some company, I believe that's true, the human resource top managers thinking, no, we better not train the worker, because if they're a dumb worker, they'll stay with the company. If they get trained, they were likely to go to another company. But I give you my personal experience while working in New York Telephone in the 80s. I get a lot of training, and maybe Richard can answer that. And did I make myself clear? I'm sorry, I talk very fast.
Yeah, well, I can tell you that in Calgary, poaching employees was ridiculous. People that didn't seem all that skilled were making $100,000, $150,000 because companies did not want to train them. And the reason they didn't want to train them is partly because they were worried if they invested those dollars into training them, then Suncor would take them, or Talisman would take them, or somebody else. So they were so what had to happen to make this happen was an industry-wide training. So all the industries got together and trained people, and trained a lot of immigrants as well. So I was working with immigrants there in particular, and these immigrants were very grateful to be trained, and they weren't going to go away. So that's my experience. Yeah. Were you the next person asked? Oh, Richard, you were asked, sorry.
Just Aspire is mostly externally focused on external education programs. AT&T does maintain a very large internal training curriculum, and whether it's quite as large as things were back 30 years ago is hard to say. But yeah.
Okay, that's it for questioning. Bruce, Bob Cohen had a quick comment.
What surprises me is that there's a whole different job skills structure out there. There are all sorts of meetups and all sorts of independent groups that are not part of the usual training system. And nobody mentioned how to take advantage of that structure that's been built up that has considerable skills. It's all extremely traditional, using job training programs.
And on that note, well, yeah, I think Bruce did, but we're scheduled to end at 3:45. It's 3:46. The coffee is now back there.